speaker will be Akeem Browder, or Browder? Browder, I got it right, good. I don't think his name was a household name that many months ago, but I think maybe some or all of you have seen the amazing coverage he's gotten in this and the recent video ad that he did with Cynthia. And I'll let him tell his story, but it's very, very moving, and I'm so pleased that you could come with them to Ithaca to tell us more.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Akeem Browder. I am not running for any office at the moment, but I am definitely here to support someone that I would say I vetted. For our protection, we have to put our efforts into getting to know those that we want in office and those that are looking for office positions that's going to represent us. I've been fighting in New York for the last 8 years for New York to end wealth-based detention. It impacted my family, it impacts our communities of color, of poor and disenfranchised communities. And I live in one of the most disenfranchised communities in the country, which is the Bronx, New York. The Bronx is one of the poorest congressional districts in America. And that being said, it's also one of the most victimized and stepped on, trodden communities throughout New York State. However, people in my community, myself, friends that I've known, have been targeted by eager police departments and just lawless courts, unjustified stop and frisk, under the hands of many past governors and mayors that allowed this to take place, knowing that these communities, when most of our parents would really consider our kids' behaviors to be somewhat childish, not deserving of a place like Rikers Island. I don't know if most of you knew my brother's story or my brother's name, but his name is Kalief Browder. Has anyone watched your hands? For those that don't know, Kalief Browder was a 16-year-old child, not a teenager or an adolescent, any of the other names that doesn't describe what a kid or captivate what a kid really is. He was a 16-year-old kid who believed in anything like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Dragon Ball. And yet, in high school, actually my mother let him go to a birthday party, and coming back from the birthday party, he was stopped by an accusation of allegedly stealing a backpack. So stealing a backpack is not a serious offense, but he went to a very serious place. How many of you know of Rikers Island? A lot. Unfortunately, that place doesn't just house nice and respectful individuals, but also the environment and the culture of violence on Rikers is not somewhere you should put kids. Unfortunately, Kalief, for being stopped for allegedly stealing a backpack, off the accusation of just that black kid stole my brother's backpack. It's just because he was a black kid that someone said stole a backpack, and so he had to wait, unfortunately, 3 years. 3 years in a place on Rikers Island, and not just sitting there as though we're sitting here right now. No, he's sitting there defending his life while defending his innocence. And that innocence took 3 years, 2 of which in solitary confinement. We all know what solitary confinement is, right? Solitary confinement for Kalief was not only just sitting in a cell, a 6x9 cell, but also being neglected. Every 4 meals they stopped feeding him. Every time he attempted suicide, they watched him and egged it on. I know this is not, I'm not trying to make this a sad event, because this is a very joyful day, and we have hope for our future, but we have to understand the harsh reality in our criminal justice system, which targets poor black and brown kids. with any other skin complexion, with any other community, and in any other medium or household income, this would not be an issue. But in the Bronx and in communities like upstate and in rural communities, we have to deal with this, and it's time to stop it. That's why I had hope. I had hope that at the beginning of this year, when I was brought out to the State of State address, how many of you have seen the State of State address or heard? The State of State address where Governor Cuomo had brought me up, and I've been working, starting the Kalief Browder Foundation as a legacy to my brother and my mother, who lost her life after finding my brother hanging, because when he came home after all charges were dropped, he came home and for a year and a half, he tried to get himself back acclimated to the environment of freedom, in which he went to college. He got his GED on his first try. He went to Lehman College, ended up getting accepted into BCC, where he started his program, wanted to go to school for business. He wanted to change his life and move forward. But those 3 years in that torturous environment weighed too much on him. He ended up taking his life in my mother's backyard, out my mother's backyard window, hung himself, and in that, my mother found him. And every mother in here and every father in here would have the same opinion or same reaction as my mother. She ended up having a heart attack. She ended up dying of a heart, that night actually, she died of 11 heart attacks in that one night. This breaks our families apart. And it kills our families and destroys what could be a future that we don't even know what Kalief could have been. But for his endurance while he sat on Rikers for 3 years, proving and fighting his innocence, even though a judge literally told him, which was the DA in the Bronx, literally told him, just take this plea. Yeah, Darcel Clark, the DA of the Bronx, who was the judge on my brother's case and got promoted the year that my brother committed suicide, to the DA of the Bronx now, who told my brother, if you just take this plea, even though there was no evidence, no victim, no backpack, but 3 years and 38 different court appearances. And in front of this judge, she said, if you just take this plea, you can go home today. Would any of us take a plea for something we didn't do? No, and we shouldn't, but they're used to our communities taking pleas because we don't have the funding to provide for proper representation, so justice isn't really there. But then we also don't have the money to get out. I mean, Harvey Weinstein literally bailed himself out on my brother's birthday this year for $1 million. So he's no longer considered a threat to society, although we all know he is. But that same bail system that would help out someone who's rich and wealthy is not the same for someone who's poor and can't afford $3,000 bail, which my mother couldn't afford, my brother couldn't get out, and so he had to stay there for 3 years. At the beginning of this year, like I was saying, Governor Cuomo brought me up to Albany with a promise that he would, in front of the state of New York, that he would pass criminal justice reform in my brother's name. Looked me in the eye and I was hopeful. Crying actually, because after my mom fought to get justice for my brother and died without seeing that justice, I finally felt like this was going to be a time that would change things, and finally we can get justice in my brother's name. Because my brother would stand for all the kids and everyone that's on Rikers unjustly, just waiting for their time to be proven innocent. And yet, April 1st came of this year, and he didn't do it. It was an empty promise. And that's what he does with our communities. He actually promises things, goes into our communities when it's time for re-election, or when it's time for his agenda to be met, and doesn't follow through. Raise the Age was one of the bills that he passed last year. Brought me up to, or it was in New York, in Harlem, came to the black and brown community of Harlem and chanted Raise the Age, which we knew we wanted. But that bill that got passed will never see the day of light in October because he didn't do the work that precedes it. Getting liaison support to transition those cases to family court, or even incorporating 16 to 21-year-olds, not just 16 and 17-year-olds. Long story short, Governor Cuomo is not the governor I would have wanted in office, but I heard a saying yesterday that I want to say, you fool us once, shame on you. You fool us twice, shame on me. He cannot and will not get a third term. New York's seen enough of Cuomo. Yes, we remember his father, but his name has long been in history for too long. Our bridge that he wants to name after himself or his father, but it has his last name, does not need to be a standing thing in our society. Does not need to be. But to prolong his legacy, this is what he's doing. And we just keep on putting him in office, but isn't that the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. There is no other result unless we get someone different in office. Not just anyone, but take a chance to listen to the platform. Visit her website. Share it with your friends, because we are all in the same boat right now. We want a different governor. We want better representation. We want to end wealth-based detention. But realistically, we're all in the same boat. We want the same. Let's go outside and on our phones right now, tweet, text, get on social media, and tell all your friends that doesn't know Cynthia and doesn't know her platform, and let them know who you support. Cynthia?